Thanks for everyone for joining us in our last session of the conference, which is called Tackling Climate Change Using an Intergenerational Approach. I'm very pleased that you all are here. Very exciting to see people from different organizations coming in. Also very excited that we have our 2 award winners for our first Climate Change Award. We have Soon Together All Nations, who are highly commended. And we have Edinburgh Garden Partners, who won the first award. Very pleased to see you both here and very much excited that we're having this session. My name is Kate Samuels, and I'm the Communications and Policy Officer for Generations Working Together. I'm passionate both about tackling climate change and intergenerational practice, so it's an absolute pleasure to do a session that brings the 2 together. And I was actually thinking to myself when I was writing some notes for this, that actually, if we do an intergenerational project and we have a climate element in there, it's a lot more powerful. Likewise, if we have a climate project and we have an intergenerational dimension, that makes it even more powerful. So actually, it makes complete sense to bring the 2 together. In Generations Working Together, we have looked over the last few years about how we can bring more climate work into our work. And this has been especially more prevalent during COP, where we've had different sessions during COP itself, where we've held different intergenerational climate conversations about climate change. We've previously held different groups during our conferences to discuss this issue because it can bring people together and it can help us make a positive difference in the world. So I'm very pleased to have our amazing speaker, Councillor Jon Molyneux, just waving over there, who is a councillor in Glasgow in Pollokshields. So today he will be talking about reflections from COP26, about some of the work from the council perspective, and also a little bit about FareShare, where he also works. And then we have 2 amazing community projects. So we have Magic Me, who have presented at COP26. They will be talking about their Generation Rebellion. And then we will have Maureen from Interfaith Scotland. He'll be talking about the vigil that they did during COP26. So very pleased to have you all here. Thank you so much. At the end, we will have some questions, but do know that you have a chat bar where you can ask any questions as well, or make any comments, or just network with each other. Thank you so much. So Jon, if you want to.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Thanks very much for coming along, everyone. Thanks for asking me to speak. My kind of prior warning is this is day 5 of COVID for me, so I'm going to probably speak a little less than I had planned to, and my intergenerational assistant who comes into shot is on day 7, so I'm kind of entertaining him at the same time. So apologies in advance if that disrupts proceedings a wee bit. I have some slides which I will hopefully, this is Iva. I will share hopefully and press that button and hope it works. I'm not getting it full screen. Why am I not getting it full screen? There we go. Can everyone see that? We're good? Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, as I said, for having me to speak. I'm really just going to share some reflections around COP26 and the issues, I guess, around climate as an intergenerational issue. Ivan, would you please dial in? And yeah, I guess I'm probably just be a kind of jumping off point for wider discussion, and it'd be really interesting to hear from the other contributors as well. I guess it seems fairly obvious that climate seems like the most obvious intergenerational issue. It's hard to think of something that's less obvious in a way. And the language has always been framed around protecting the planet for future generations and all those sorts of things. And then lots of the specific issues around climate, whether it's issues like pension fund divestment, obviously again have a very clear intergenerational dimension to them. but I actually think, not kind of touch on this, this slide was an obvious one for me as well, because, the two most obvious figureheads, if you like, for the climate movement, certainly in this country, and arguably globally, are obviously representing different ends of the age spectrum, and drawing the kind of commonalities out there, I think it's helpful. But actually, increasingly, this is this quote here from Boris Johnson, which I think kind of reflects that. People, we're going to be judged by the future generations, all that sort of stuff. Actually, things have moved on. This isn't a next generational issue anymore. This is this generational issue. It's going to affect him. It's affecting me. It's affecting people in all different parts of the world, in every continent. We've seen fires in the Arctic, floods in Northern Europe. Also everywhere. There isn't a single part of the globe that isn't now being touched by the effects of the climate and nature emergencies. So, and it's affecting every generation. So it's not it's not just a future generations thing anymore. It's a this generation thing. These kids actually are from my ward, from Pollock Shields in Glasgow, who I just turned up at the square in George Square for the climate march, and there was a huge contingent of young people from my ward, which was really great to see. But yeah, COP was obviously billed as the last chance saloon in many ways for taking serious action, of obviously going back to the what people say was the landmark intergovernmental panel report in 2018. There's probably been 2 or 3 similar subsequent equally landmark reports since then, but the one that kind of precipitated the climate emergency. And then there was obviously COP25 in Madrid, which was fairly universally derided as having missed the mark. So COP26 in Glasgow was really seen as last chance saloon to actually make some meaningful progress, and then obviously it being delayed by the pandemic, I think raised the ambition, or certainly raised the hopes and the aspirations for COP26. And it was my first time at a COP. Might be my last time, I don't know. And it obviously was a very different experience in the context of the pandemic. And there's lots of, I've just put on the slide here, there are clearly different views on the effectiveness of what was achieved through the official COP negotiations. And I'm not here today on a political platform, and I'm not going to get overly partisan in my comments. I might stray a little bit, but that's probably just coming from where I am personally rather than on these issues politically. But it's clear that the main view was that there was some progress made, it probably wasn't the progress that most people who've been around, again, as an intergenerational thing, who've been around this movement for a long time, a lot longer than I have. There've been people who've been around, and I met some of them, people like Farhani Amin, who've been around COP negotiations since COP1, and have seen the whole process move on. I think clearly a sense that it didn't deliver on the aspirations and ambitions that had been set. But that's not to say that there weren't positives, and maybe when we get into discussion we can unpack some of those things. I was just going to share a little bit about my personal experience as well, and these are just some of my photos. You can see Ivor's there on his first climate demo with his big brother, and that's the climate march was astonishing. Then having that many people on the streets in Glasgow of all different generations and from all different backgrounds, making that show of unity and defiance, etc. Was really powerful. There's the next picture, the top right, was a divestment event that I spoke at, led by the Divest Strathclyde campaign, which had a disco theme, divestment disco, and disco is clearly the best intergenerational soundtrack. Everyone from all ages can dance to that. 1.5 to Stay Alive was the theme, and it was a fantastic event. And again, those opportunities to connect with people that came out of that. The bottom corner, these two are both back in my ward again. was really fortunate to have the walk with Amal, and then people saw the very big puppet of a Syrian refugee girl. And the whole, I mean, the kind of experience, I was quite cynical about that actually as a thing. I was like, this isn't going to be very moving or emotional or inspiring. It's just a puppet. But actually the being there and seeing the interaction and being able to interact with people around that was incredibly powerful. Yeah, and probably was actually ended up being my highlight, I think, of the whole COP26. And then the last picture in the corner is at the same location. There's a community venue in Port Shields called the Bowling Green, which is an absolutely incredible space. But it was the main, or one of the main venues for the Minga Indigena delegation, which was the Minga, people might know, were a kind of gathering or a collective of many of the indigenous communities around the world, mainly from the Americas, mainly from right the way from Alaska down to the Amazon, but also with other indigenous communities as well. And again, they went through a lot of difficulties, even just getting to Glasgow and being accommodated with all the price gouging and all those sorts of things. But actually, to be able to experience their contribution to the discussions, and actually into the formal proceedings as COP, as well as within the community, and there's a huge intergenerational dimension to how many Indigenous communities see the world, how they view the world, their kind of spirituality and the connection to the natural world, the oral traditions, all those sorts of things. It's so woven through how they approach the climate issue, and it was really impressive to be part of their contributions to COP. And then just finishing off, I guess my main reflections. I have many. I could probably talk for hours, and I won't spare my own voice as much as anything, as well as to spare you having to listen. But there's three things for me, I guess, about the elements around success or failure of COP, and there are elements of kind of intergenerational dimensions to all of these, I think. And the first one, going back to the future generations will judge us, etc., the Boris Johnson quote I showed earlier, and for me, the big takeaway here is, well, what are we measuring success by? Because lots of people are very quick to pat everyone on the back for getting an agreement. But that's measuring success in the terms of what politicians can achieve. And I'm saying that as a politician. It's not actually success in this issue is measured by what happens to the science, what actually happens to mean global Earth temperatures. That's success, and that's what future generations will judge us on, not but you did very well getting an agreement that didn't stop temperature increases sufficiently. So bringing that back to the science and thinking about how, it's quite a hard thing, but the effectiveness of something, the effectiveness of a process like COP to actually deliver the kind of change that we need, or whether we need a different process, a less political process that actually means we're more likely to get the outcomes that we need. The second, I guess, key reflection is about power. And although this isn't, just about intergenerational power, I think the point here about we're not going to make progress, we're not going to get climate justice unless people who currently have power are prepared to give some of that up. And that was obvious, I think, apparent in the kind of watering down of the final agreements. And I do think there's a point about intergenerationality there, that the more we support culture and way of working, etc., that's about sharing or giving up power rather than one person or group of people holding it over another, then we're not going to make that progress. And then finally, I guess, just the reflections about the benefits of being in the room, but also the benefits of being out of the room, and working in communities. And again, that was the big success I took from COP. Wasn't necessarily what was achieved in the SEC venues, but certainly what I took away from the work that happened in my local community, and I know happened in other communities across Glasgow, and will have happened in other communities around the world, in terms of bringing people together to really get that opportunity to connect around the issues and collectively think about what we can do to tackle it. Yeah, I think that's probably the big takeaway. So I'll stop there because, like I say, my voice probably won't hold out much longer. But thank you for listening, and I look forward to debate. And I should stop sharing.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing that. And the big takeaway for me, oh, everyone is clapping. We can't hear everyone, but we can see everyone's clapping around. The big takeaway for me, I think there was the part that you said that, you know, being in the room is just part of the story. And for different events and things that we've held during COP and after COP, I think people were quite keen that, you know, this is not it, you know, it needs to go into the community. The grassroots is where you actually will have a lot of power. It was amazing to hear that. Thank you so much. What we'll do is we'll leave questions towards the end so we can have some time for the other two speakers. Our next speaker is Emily Bird from Magic Me, who's a project manager. And Emily has been working with youth and community groups since 2015. Recently, she's been working on an intergenerational project, bringing older and younger women together to explore climate emergency and what it means to be a climate change activist. Emily will share project highlights and learning, focusing on the power of intergenerational activism in climate justice movements. Over to you, Emily.
Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Emily. As Kate said, I'm the project manager at Magic Me, and we're really pleased to have been invited to speak today. I'm going to start the presentation with a 5-minute film about our most recent intergenerational arts project. Which does a better job at describing it than me talking. So I'm just going to share my screen with you all. And if there's problems with sound, just let me know.
There's a lot of plastic waste and there's a lot of rubbish, and it will be really hard for the new generation to see our planet in such a dump.
So this project is about the climate and ecological crisis. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be mapping out things that are going on around us, around our local area, the different communities we might be part of, that we might want to join and do something.
Join local groups
with local and global knowledge.
We're taking action, we're being active, but we're doing it locally around the area that we feel like we're a part of.
The main thing is mixing with people. I do like meeting people.
Participation, turning up to make a difference. One small step for girl, one giant leap for change.
That's great.
Yeah. You see somebody, you don't know what they're about. We always think we're so different because what we wear and how we talk and whatever. So it's nice to meet up with other people and learn how they tick, what makes them tick. You've got to understand other people rather than just our own selfish thoughts.
Art has a really good use of helping climate change because many people, they really like art, and art is a way to express climate change on a different basis. For example, you can express it with dancing, singing, or just art in general to make like a really big impact because it's really like bold and bright. I'm here to try and influence others to join us, to try and save the planet from plastic waste as it is getting worse.
Winnie, you said you were interested in repairing and fast fashion. You said that's a really big problem.
Yeah, cut and contrive, you know. Because like, I don't want this, I could change it into something, make it shorter.
Yeah.
and take that and put a sleeve on it rather than buying something new, because this quality is better than the new one. My grandma called it cut and contrive.
That's so nice.
Because you don't waste. You turn it into something.
Help each other give a new life to old clothes.
Cut and contrive.
Everybody will have one of these, and on one side it will say a challenge that we're facing, and that will be in black and white, and that will kind of express the gloom in a way and the difficulty that we face. But when it's turned over, there'll be an image which helps people looking at it think what they can do.
Tracy, you said that you were interested in sustainability last week.
I've been concentrating on farming, bringing the community to work as one, so that we give each other ideas. At Magic Me, it was about how we are going to engage with these people through doing some drawings.
Eco Club is basically similar, but instead of having adults, it's more children trying to make their own change. As a group, we convinced our school to create water bottles for everyone so they can use it till they leave. I find that in big groups and communities, you find people with like the same opinions as you.
Working in a group gives it greater strength rather than just the strength of the individual. You've got the strength of the group to back you up when things get difficult.
It really does make sense to involve groups of youngsters. After all, it is their planet as well as ours, and I think a lot of them got some very good ideas.
I really feel like food waste is a really big problem. Having more community kitchens, but also these little areas where people can access food for free.
We've all got to learn to love our spaces, and often local people have knowledge that nobody else has.
It makes me feel happy that there might be some hope for the planet and more people will come and join us and it will be more united than ever.
Sorry, bear with me. I've lost, there we are. Sorry about that. So you've just seen one of two intergenerational groups that took part in Generation Rebellion, and today I'll be talking about some key learning points from the project and why we believe intergenerational activism is important in climate justice. So Magic Me, we're an intergenerational arts charity based in East London. And we run an annual women's project, which for the last 2 years has been Generation Rebellion, bringing together students aged 12 to 13 with older women aged 50 to 80 plus to explore the climate emergency and what it means to be a climate change activist. So with research showing women are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change and the growing disconnect between older and younger people in the climate justice movement, it felt like an urgent topic for us to address within our work. and we've put together a few key learning points around exploring the climate emergency with an intergenerational group. So it was important not to assume that specific themes or interests align with age groups. For example, younger people are the only ones interested in taking direct action. It was important to recognise and understand why older and younger people are often excluded from climate conversations, and a participant in a workshop noted that older and younger people often have less spending power and are therefore ignored in political spaces. And finally, the importance of meeting people where they are at on their climate journey, and again, not assuming this will align with age. So in the first part of the project, the R&D phase, participants fed back that it felt too big and overwhelming as a topic. So we responded to that by bringing 2 smaller groups together in the final stage, each focusing on a particular theme of the global or the local, which were the group you saw in the film. So what part does intergenerational action play in the fight for climate justice? Well, through weekly creative workshops, assumptions and stereotypes around who is and who isn't active in the climate justice movement were quickly broken down, and the group found they were stronger together. Part of this process was about hearing different perspectives and having meaningful dialogue outside of peer groups. And you can see a quote here from a younger person about how their opinion of older people changed during the project. So regardless of age, we all have local knowledge and expertise, and by bringing the knowledge and expertise of different ages together, we can create lasting change both locally and globally. Learning from zero to infinity. So this text became part of a final artwork, but began as a conversation with an older participant saying, we're in a school, why can't people of my age come in here and learn too? And this sparked a conversation about the importance of different ages learning together about climate change in order to be able to take action together. There is more than one type of activists. Well, the group mapped out the qualities of an ideal activist, and it was clear there were many different skills needed to make change. And then they began to look at their own strengths. For example, a younger participant was a passionate cook, and this skill was very valuable at protests, keeping people fed and morale high. Intergenerational activism has the ability to connect communities and individuals, uniting all of our strengths and skills. One of the aims of the project was to spark wider action and dialogue, and Generation Rebellion had the opportunity to do this at COP26, where the group zoomed in live to the conference to share their experience and learning, as well as lead the audience in a series of short activities. The group felt it was really important for audiences to be given the opportunity to talk to one another in the same way they had. And here is a quote from an audience member about their experience of the event. For anyone who's interested, you can watch the full COP26 event on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the chat, along with another film from the project capturing the second intergenerational group that focused on the global. I'm going to end on a quote from a participant, which I think sums up the power of intergenerational activism. When we are together, the voice is heavier, the voice is stronger. That's the only way we can influence the change we want.
Thank you, Emily. And as I said before, hold your questions till later, but it was amazing to see some of the quotes that you were saying, and especially the one where often younger people, they're led to believe that older people are against them and vice versa. So there's these barriers that are sometimes out in the media that might not necessarily be true when we get down to communities and we start doing this work on the ground. So thank you so much. Our next speaker is Maureen, Director of Interfaith Scotland. And she has delivered the annual Interfaith Week, and also she's done a vigil on George Square at COP26. So I shall pass on to Maureen. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you. And 2 great presentations. I've no idea how on earth to follow such really informative and actually very uplifting presentations at the end of the day, especially Magic Me, seeing people there together. So thank you for just giving me the honour of being on a platform with all of you. It's really great to be here. I'm going to go very quickly into what we did in COP, but before I do, I just want to share with you a story, because it really had such a powerful impact on me and showed the intergenerational engagement that takes place, not just because of COP, but because of the climate crisis. And it was New Year's Eve 2019. My husband and I were watching Jules Holland, as you do, and I got a phone call from friends in Australia. They're called Christina and James, and they're both environmentalists. They work for the South Pacific Regional Environment Programme. When we were in Samoa, they were friends, really good friends with us. And they said, we're standing in a field at the moment with 70 neighbours, surrounded by walls of flames. We don't know if we're going to survive this. We just want to let you know that we love you and that, you know, we valued having you in our lives. It was such a huge shock. And they said, we've only got a little bit of battery and everyone needs to phone around, you know, use the bandwidth. So please just think about us, pray for us. And that was it. And it was 3 days later before we heard from them, and it took 2.5 days to rescue them. They did survive, but the 90-acre piece of land that they had saved all their life for, that they had dreamt about in the Australian bush. They had dreamt about introducing indigenous species, about creating almost their own environmental, you know, paradise, was completely blackened, charcoaled, and gone. Their home was gone. Everything was gone. And of course, it's a huge shock to their system. But roll on 2 years, and they had decided that they weren't going to leave that plot of land, that the earth that they had decided to settle in deserved them staying and replenishing that land. And the way that they did it was to work with young people. They're my age, they're in their 60s, to work with young people from universities and colleges across Australia to come and help them, people that, you know, with a passion for the environment, with scientific knowledge as well, and some with just practical skills of wanting to clear the bush and all that sort of thing. And they worked together across generations to if you like, bring back to life the land that had been completely burnt by the fires that raged across Australia. And I love having updates from them on how this intergenerational, actual real space in real time, you know, recreating the environment together, how that is going. And they couldn't do it, absolutely couldn't do it as one generation on their own. But it's really heartwarming to see that even out of such crazy circumstances that the whole world is facing, the intergenerational work really does make a huge difference. And just before I do the PowerPoint presentation, I want to say something that usually shocks people, and that is to say that actually the climate is not facing a crisis. Climate doesn't wake up in the morning and go, oh my goodness, what a crisis I'm facing today. The climate is simply responding to the impact of our human crisis. And I absolutely believe that the crisis that we're facing is a spiritual, emotional, and social crisis. It's a crisis of the way that we are living, the way that we are overusing the resources of the planet, the way that we're overheating our houses, the way that the global north doesn't care about the global south. So it's just, there's injustices, and it's all, I mean, all the IPPG report makes it very, very clear that it's the human impact on our planet that is the crisis. So, and actually, if we didn't exist on the planet, the crisis, the climate would just carry on being the climate. It's not in crisis at all. We're in crisis. And so, as director of Interfaith Scotland, and with COP coming to Glasgow, I had to think, what is the gift that faith communities can bring to the conversations around the climate crisis. And, you know, many of the conversations were about our individual, our social, our global responsibilities. How do we tackle climate injustice? How do we bring a change of heart to the environment? And I'll now screen share, hoping that it will. It's not as quite as an exciting screen share as the others have done, but it's been mentioned that we. Sorry, I'm pressing my button for going to the next slide, but it's not coming up. So bear with me. There we go. So obviously we're an interfaith organisation, and what we decided, the first thing that we would do was we would align Scottish Interfaith Week, which is an annual festival that we hold always in November. We would align that exactly with the dates of COP. So the opening of COP on the Sunday was also the first day of Scottish Interfaith Week. And we decided that we'd have a prayer vigil. And the prayer vigil was basically, you can see it at the top there, to allow people from all faiths to come together and to pray that the negotiators in the Blue Zone would make sensible decisions, to pray for our planet, to pray that we would all have a change of heart and start living more simply upon the planet. So many different things to pray for. And it was, we were only allowed 500 people in George Square because of COVID, but we managed to live stream it. And so, you know, there's another 5,000 joined us live streaming for that prayer and meditation vigil. And it was it was a very profound moment. There were people there from all generations and all ages. It was perhaps in the moments of, after the religious leaders of Scotland, who are of a particular generational age, had presented prayers from all the different faith traditions, from Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, Baha'i, Muslim, pagan. They were all had presented their prayers for peace and for COP26. And then we had a couple of minutes of silence, and that was absolutely incredible, to be in George Square and there was not a sound for 2 minutes, and then this flock of birds just flew up right across the square. It was for me, it was a really, really cosmic moment. And then throughout that week, Scottish Interfaith Week, we held there was about 80 or 90 events held all across Scotland. Lots of them were intergenerational. There were obviously from people from all different communities, all different areas, but it was so important for us. And I think this was really highlighted in Emily's presentation, that people had to engage with the climate crisis locally, right where they were. And one of the wonderful things about Scottish Interfaith Week is it isn't focused on Glasgow or Edinburgh or Inverness. It's literally takes place all across the whole of Scotland, right from Shetland in the north to Dumfries in the south. There were events, the majority of which would have been intergenerational events, where people came together to have dialogue or action and to do things related to the climate crisis. Calling it the climate crisis, it's a shortcut, I guess. And the difference that they could make in their local communities. The image up there in the corner is of Satya from Interfaith Glasgow, myself, and someone called Mina from Tuvalu. And Tuvalu is one of the islands in the Pacific that is disappearing under the rising sea level. And we met with them because we were really, really keen to get to hear the voices of Indigenous people. And I used to live in the Pacific. I lived in an island called Samoa. So for me, it was it's also a personal thing to meet with, someone from the Pacific. So we went and we had a cuppa with Mina. And on asking him, what could we Interfaith Scotland do to help the situation in Tuvalu? And he said, obviously, carry on with your climate work, but the immediate thing that we need are laptops for our children. And that was so surprising for me. And he said, because What gives us hope is being connected, globally connected with the whole world, to know that we're all in this together, that the world cares, and we don't have enough resources on our island. We don't have laptops to connect our students with the globe. So we then started a little project, raising funds. It's just called Laptops for Tuvalu. And again, that's a kind of an intergenerational project where together we're raising funds for the Indigenous South. And another thing that we thought was really important was just to get the voices of some of the young people that were at the vigil in George Square. And I think I'm going to have to stop sharing and reshare because I forgot to press the sound thing. So sorry about that. And then I'll show you the video. Again, I think, like Emily, probably hearing the voices of the young people that were with all of us in George Square is more powerful than listening to my voice. So I'll stop screen sharing for a minute and I'll re-screen share, but I'll do it properly with the share sound and optimize for video clip. So hopefully this will work. So I'm now about to, I hope, but it'll let me go to the next slide. It's not allowing me to do. Seems to have. There we go. So I'll quickly play this.
My name is Hanan and I'm 20 years old. I'm a member of the Baha'i community.
Hi, I'm Aliza. I'm 15 years old and I'm Muslim.
My name is Anish Subramanian. I'm a practicing Hindu and I'm 17 years old.
My name is Anna and I'm 26 years old. I practice in the Zen Buddhist tradition.
Shanti, greetings of peace. My name is Birijit and I am 21 years old. I'm a young representative of the Brahma Kumaris.
Namaste, I am Anand. I am 15 years old and I am a practicing Hindu.
The climate injustice is not a solitary issue but interconnected with a variety of other social issues, and the Baha'i faith stands firmly against all forms of injustice.
As a young person who is part of the generation that will be most affected by climate change, I think it's certainly the duty of young people to put forward their ideas and their views about climate change as much as possible in order to make a difference.
Climate injustice is when people are not treated equally, and in Islam it's pushed that everyone gets treated equally.
Climate justice matters to all of us because it's not just the nature, but it is the future of humanity.
Climate justice matters to me because within my tradition, paying attention is the core principle of our practice, and climate justice is about paying attention to what's happening in the world right now.
So in Hinduism, the environment is an integral part of our lives. Our Vedas and scriptures emphasize us to live in harmony with nature.
I'm really excited to be part of the vigil and being in the presence of all the different religious leaders and everyone from different faiths.
I'm really privileged to be here at today's Interfaith Vigil. I think it's incredible to see so many different faiths coming together, talking about an issue that is important for all of us to be a part of this discussion.
I felt like the vigil was amazing because it was nice seeing all religions come together, and it was a sign that humanity is all together. We are together. We should not be against each other, but we should work together.
So I'm participating in the vigil because presence is very important, and I wish to raise awareness with other tradition of what our hopes are for the COP26 climate conference.
I'm participating in the vigil because I'm excited for COP26.
The vigil went amazingly, and it really was heartwarming to see people from all walks of life and different faiths come together today. I am sure we can take the momentum from today and going forward to spread a positive impact on our future.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for sharing that video. We were a bit short in time, but I thought, you know, the best thing is kind of to hear the different voices and the impact. So let's make time for that. So now we've got a little bit of time for questions. We're finishing at 4. So if anyone wants to put a question in chat or you want to ask live, then please do go ahead. Would anyone like to go?
If no one will go, then I'll ask a question, because I'll just do that to try and start some discussion. So I suppose I want to ask a question of 3 panelists, and then we get started. So Jon, first of all, it was really interesting to watch your show, and actually, you know, your slideshow, because I recognised the giant puppet, and I saw some of those things online, and I've got to say that I never participated going into the city because of all the other issues with COVID and everything, but I really wanted to. But one of my friends was on the television dressed as a polar bear. Her sister and her wanted to draw attention to cycling in Glasgow, and how, you know, we want people to cycle, yet young and old families together, yet the roads are in such a bad state that it's difficult. So she dressed as a polar bear in the back of her sister's bike. And I just thought that might be a small thing, Jon, but if we want to make a difference to our environment, surely we want the footpaths to be able that people can walk in them and they can cycle without having big bumps in the roads and the pavements.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I saw that polar bear stunt as well. I think that caught the attention. So there were so many things like that throughout COP. I mean, that's one of the inspiring things, which is so many people doing, you know, their thing and getting attention. You know, what might seem like a small thing, but getting the wider attention for having done that. Yeah, I mean, Glasgow's heading in the right direction as it comes to improving the state of our streets and facilities for cycling and all that sort of stuff. You know, there's not enough money is the actual reality. We just voted a few weeks ago for the council's budget every year, and every year the budget gets less and less, so there isn't enough money to put into these things, and you know, that's a challenge. You know, we've got all these things that we need to do. I mean, you've highlighted one thing, which is an area where we need to invest to help people to change their behaviour. There's umpteen other things that need investment. So that now I am getting political, I guess, that you know, we need to think really seriously about how we're prepared to pay for the changes that we need, and I think that is going to involve some difficult decisions at some point. You know, that should be basic in terms of having roads and footways and cycleways that allow people to get about the city and not have to rely on the private car. That should be basic. There's probably some bigger, more challenging issues to come. How we heat our homes. All these things are going to change so much, or have to change in the next few years, and we need to. I don't think we've quite got there yet in terms of people's comprehension about the scale of the transformation that's needed. But yeah, it's a good point. Thank you for raising it.
Well, thank you. We've had lots of intergenerational, I would say, kind of happenings across Scotland where young and older people have come together and went out to take photographs of pavements, and the young have helped the old to draw attention to the issue all over Scotland. So it's an intergenerational thing that is awareness of sometimes people can't get out because of it. So thank you. And can I ask Emily a question? And if anyone else wants to come in, they can come in. And Emily, what I was observing in your, it was amazing. I really loved watching it and listening to it. And it made me think of the fact that, you know, they were listening to each other. So the old were listening to the young. And there was this thing that I read about over a year ago about how much the older generation were kind of blamed. You know, the finger was almost pointed at them of, you have done this to us, because the press had taken a hold of it and turned it into their own, you know, imagining of what it was. But the thing about the older generation was that Like my granny would never have been on holiday abroad. She'd never been on an aeroplane. She never had a car. She made everything from scratch, and she even made her own clothes. So you got new clothes once a year on the 1st of May, I think it was, once a year. So our younger generations actually, and they get new clothes quite a lot. And they go on holiday and they go to concerts and they leave their tents in the grass areas. And it's not a judgment of that. It's just that it kind of doesn't even up. Does that make sense? Because they want environmental change, but in actual fact, I think together the young and the old could learn from each other. Being thrifty was another one. Like my granny used to say, always take care of the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves. So it's things like that I think that together our young can learn and our old can learn from each other. And your example, Emily, was just amazing.
Yeah, I think that came up. I just looking at the transcript from the COP event, and one of our older people spoke about we need solidarity so that we do not get turned against each other, that we blame each other, you know, because otherwise people in power, in politics, they can turn to the young people and tell them to blame the older people. And that's, you know, exactly as you said, a lot of older people haven't been involved in the process of, you know, buying lots of things constantly. You know, that's not something that everyone has been able to do or has been part of. And yeah, how things have changed so much since a lot of the older women in the group were younger, but also recognizing, I think, that you know, the difficulty of being a younger person now with this constant pressure to take action. And I think one of the young people in a workshop said, you know, I'm being told I can't shop at Primark anymore, but my older sister got to do that. And the sort of loss of, you know, choice that you might have had as a younger person. And that's really difficult, and sharing that with older people so that they can understand what it might be like to be a younger person at the moment with the climate emergency was really important. And just, yeah, those very open conversations that were being had about, you know, I find it difficult to do this, I find it difficult to do that, well, maybe we can do this, you know, that kind of thing was just really evident throughout the project, that we didn't have to do much, you know, the participants kind of got there for themselves, really. So yeah, the second film as well that I've put in the chat definitely sort of demonstrates that a bit more as well.
I was going to say, I have a question for Maureen. We're just about finishing up because we've hit 4. I had a question. You were mentioning, you know, almost like the spiritual feel of getting different generations, different religions coming together. Is that something that you kind of noticed within all your work, or was it different because it was more, you know, climate based? Do you think climate is something that runs through all your work anyway?
I think that the climate crisis is probably one of the areas that you can very effectively engage the younger generation together with the older generation. I mean, religion as such is not necessarily something that young people go, yay, I'm going to be going along to something that's religious. Although I think young people are deeply spiritual. And again, this is that kind of stereotype that's out there that, you know, that somehow or another the religion is for older people and not that younger people don't have a spiritual heart to them. Of course they do, you know. And so I loved what Emily was saying about the kind of breaking down the stereotypes around particularly around generations and the climate crisis. I mean, and also what Bella was saying. I mean, I grew up in Elgin and shared one room with my bedroom with my sister and my brother. We had no central heating. We used to scrape the ice off the inside of the windows, you know, and now every house is heated to the hilt, and, you know, there's change that has to be made. And actually, the older generation might not find it as difficult as the younger generation because they've lived it already. They've lived with with little, you know, in certainly in quite a lot of stages of their life, because we're now living in the kind of luxury that people could never have imagined, really. Not all peoples, of course. I mean, there's still poverty in Scotland, of course there is, you know. But I think there's massive changes. It's not all, I think Jon mentioned this, it's not all just about government. It is also, or even big industry, it's about all of us taking responsibility and making change. And that requires a deep introspection about what should I be doing, could I be doing, how can I change, how can I live in a different way that doesn't have a massive imprint on the planet, you know, how can I use less resources, less heat, less meat, less, you know, and because Interfaith Scotland's about dialogue, having conversations is one of the ways to explore all of that kind of thing. And it was great to see the intergenerational work that's been done.
Thank you. Just to say that we're finishing up. However, I can see that people are posting some questions, and there's maybe appetite for more of these chats and conversations. We will be looking to see what else we can do. And please do get in touch with both me or Bella if something does come up. I thought I would finish just with something that's been put in the chat from our winner for the Climate Award. So Deb said, it struck me watching everyone's presentations how overwhelming climate change and climate change solutions can be, and that intergenerational solidarity is such an important thing to build a more resilient society in the face of climate crisis. So I think that's a great note to end on, and thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming to the rest of the conference and for making this last session an absolute pleasure. I've loved hearing from our three speakers, and please do get in touch and share any ideas or intergenerational climate projects that you do have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.